7 o'clock. So welcome to Position in Neutrality. Welcome to New Freedom. Is there anyone in the room that has never been here before? Your first time visitors? Oh, good. Wow. Great. Thank you very much for coming. Let us warn you in advance. You're liable to experience us just a little different than other meetings of other fellowships you may have attended, and the primary reason that's liable to happen is we intend for you to have a different experience here. What we do here, we've been doing for lots of years, we take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book, and we use this book in 12-step recovery. Why? Yeah, the process described by these authors has been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances. So what I attempt to do is show you how I find my experience in the book and encourage you to have your experience with the book. And if we both do our job, we share a spiritual experience in this room every night. How many of you have been here before and can witness for these folks that does happen? There you go. So those of you online don't know, but they're raising their hands to signify that indeed we share a spiritual experience in this room. When we speak of a spiritual experience in 12-step recovery, we're talking about a sensory experience. You'll feel it. When you do, I'll know, and I'll call it to your attention, because we would cheat you to talk to you about the power we call God without giving you a demonstration of the power. Fair enough? The other thing I got to tell you, how many of you are members in here tonight? Oh, wow, look at you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you. How many of you are graduates in here tonight? Wow, thank you. So the graduates may have told you guys, if you're members here, I see a lot of you are wearing your red lanyards. That means you're already peer leaders. You're serving. Thank you for that. And I also want to make sure you tell all your peers here that are members programming that their families are welcome to this event. We open the door to them at 6:15. They're also welcome to Chaplain Lee's service on Saturday night. He does the Recovery Church. And regardless of how long you've been here, if it's your first day and you want your family to come see your new digs and what you're trying to do to get everything together, we encourage you to do that. We want you to let them see you in this environment and share what's going on with you. Fair enough? Okay. So I think that was all I was going to talk about tonight. We're going to take a look at the suggested instruction for step 2. Because last week we talked about Bill's experience of powerlessness and unmanageability, and then his encounter with Ebby and how that unfolded, and he started getting introduced to the manner of living, but we kind of left it there without our real encounter with power. Step 2 is all about encountering power. That's why the step says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So we're going to start for this instruction on page 44. If you're following along in the book, and if not, I'm going to read from the book. It's a good idea to follow along in the book because you'll never know if I'm lying to you if you don't. Okay, so chapter 4, it's a chapter entitled We Agnostics. So let's see if we can relate to them, because not all of us are good at labels, right? How many of you are believers, but you had some struggles with addiction and other kinds of behaviors? So we don't like to classify ourselves as agnostics, do we? Then there's people that don't believe in God or don't believe God can be proven to exist, and they either go the other way. Does that make sense? So we're going to learn a little bit about the original fellowship and what they discovered through this process. Fair enough? Yeah. So it says, in the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. So in those preceding chapters, did you learn something of alcoholism? Yes. What's the one symptom we have in common?
Physical cravings.
Yeah, that allergy, that physical craving, that manifestation of an allergy, the doctor opined that somehow when I put these substances in my body, I can't control the amount I take. Or even if I can control it, I don't enjoy it. Right. That make sense? Okay. Then it says, we hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. So that's why we just asked that question. Right. right? If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. So are either of those true?
Yes.
Which did you discover first?
Couldn't stop.
You couldn't stop or you couldn't stay stopped? Okay. So how many of you couldn't stop and stay stopped? And how many of you, like Sean, just got no stop? Okay, so either one of those is decisive if I want to at least learn the truth and start moving in the truth about me, yes? Okay, so then it says, if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. You know, I think we need to talk about the authors telling me that about their discovery, because we get the impression in our fellowships that all you need to do is just stay abstinent. How many of you have tried abstinence? What the authors are opining is that I have to find and maintain a spiritual experience because my addiction was my effort to find and maintain a spiritual experience. That's why they call alcohol spirits. So abstinence is not the goal. Awakening is the goal. And when I am awakened and I'm serving, I experience something we like to call spiritual inebriation. Does that make sense? Okay. So I wanted you to see what they said, so when I start saying things later, you won't think, that old motherfucker lying to me. Because I'm just telling you what up with what they're telling me. Okay. To one who feels he's atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. How many of you in here do now or at one time thought yourself atheist or agnostic? Okay. Did it seem impossible? If I even considered it that far, right? I just read right by it because I had an idea of what a spiritual experience was versus a reality. Yes? Maybe? I'm just talking about me. I'm trying to relate to somebody. Okay. All right. So, but to continue as he is means disaster. How many of you concluded at least that much? Because some of us just conclude disaster. We don't concede spirits for a minute. Okay. Especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. How many of you have concluded you may be an addict of the hopeless variety? How many of you are going to need more reading? That's okay. That's okay. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face.
That's funny.
Sean's the color commentary. But let's look at why he finds that humorous. Alcoholic death, happy, joyous, and free. Pick one.
Can I get back to you tomorrow?
Do you relate to him? We come from that place, though, don't we? Okay. Well, it says, but it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. What type? Atheists or agnostics declared. It's important you get that. Half their original fellowship were atheist or agnostic. What would the other half have been? Probably believers dying in their addiction anyway. So that kind of encompasses the whole bunch, don't you? It also takes the wind out of the sails of the people who tell you it's okay to remain agnostic or atheist. Because they said, every one of us has come to believe in, possessed of. They flatly declare, right? So if you want what they have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, understand that it isn't sitting around abstinent. It's walking in the Spirit, regardless of what they believed. Right? That's the whole point of the testimony of this book. Okay. So it says, at first some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. How many of you did some of that? Come on, I've met a lot of you guys who've gone through some serious problems in your life. And often you were high when you encountered said problems and still denied that you had a problem with substances. Okay, so I'm not trying to argue the point. I'm just trying to unravel the truth about me, and in so doing, maybe you'll see some about you. Does that make sense? Okay. After a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. Sounds pretty emphatic. Who's we? Rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed their path. If I do not find a spiritual basis of life, then I am not on that path. I'm on my own. I'm back in Joe's Anonymous. It was a lonely place. Sitting behind the dumpster. Rarely have we seen a person fail. Okay. Perhaps it's going to be that way with you. But cheer up, something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows you need not be disconcerted. Why does their experience show that? Because they didn't remain atheist or agnostic. The experience changed their mind. Do not conform to the ways of this world. Rather be transformed through the renewal of your mind, if any of you know where that comes from. Okay? All right. Some of you are feeling that. Who felt that? That's happening in you. Okay? All right. So if mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. So how many of you tried changing your codes and philosophies? How many of you would not have described your outcome as recovered? I will tell you, we laugh about that, but I flatly declare to you I am recovered because I am redeemed. I was radically changed by this power through this process. And he's empowered me to stand before you and tell you of him. Because if you're here, he's here for you and in you and through you. Guarantee, whether you're aware or not. Okay. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Any of you try really hard to be good? Did you find out you fell short? Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. So you guys are getting them, right? These people know an experience that all of us know all too well. Right? Okay. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. They put that in italics. Why does a power to live have to be a power greater than me? Yeah, because in active addiction, there was a power to die a lot more powerful than my power to live. So if I don't find this power to live within me, doesn't matter how many resolutions I make about what I'm not going to do, I'm going to do it again. Does that make sense? Okay. So then it says, obviously, but where and how were we to find this power? Well, that would be the question, wouldn't it?
That's exactly what this book's about.
Thank you. Thank you, Lance. I don't want to read that part yet, though, because I know I got some tweakers in this room, don't I? See, if I don't get you to some answers really fast and you're a tweaker, you'll have the furniture apart before we... So go to page 55. We do not want bored tweakers. Okay, so I'm on page 55, and I'm one paragraph down to actually the second paragraph. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. I love it that you guys, you've been here before, huh? When we say God, you say, power. Because we don't want to confuse people that think we're talking theology when we're talking relationship. Does that make sense? Okay. So is everyone in here man, woman, or child? Or some combination thereof? So, that being so, deep down inside of you, according to their witness, is the fundamental idea of God. Now, I've heard people over the years going, I don't believe in God, so he's not deep down inside of me. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to believe in God for him to believe in you. And they didn't say your idea of God was inside of you. They said God's idea of you was inside of you. That's why we call him the Creator. Does that make sense? So what we're trying to do is find out how I'm obscuring that, and we're going to go into that next. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other it's there. Calamities, pomps, worships. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. How many of you have had a friend? Like 6 of you. Where's my tweakers? You had freaking rooms full of friends. They were under the trailer, everything. How'd that friend make you feel? Even the thought of some friends can make us feel, can it? They also seemingly could make us enraged. Okay, so what we're trying to help you see is your awareness of the feeling, and you're looking outwardly as if that were idolatry. I'm not telling you the emotion that was responding to what you were thinking is the power, but what I am telling you is your awareness of the power is the power we call God. So what we need you to do is wake up to the Spirit within you, because once you know that, then you'll know that something outside of you cannot be causing how you're thinking and feeling. Does that make sense? Okay. So has everyone had a feeling for a friend that cares to talk about it? Okay, then you know enough about God to get started, regardless of whether you're atheist or agnostic. Does that make sense? Isn't it comforting to know we can start at a simpler level? That's what the authors say. Okay. So it says, sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there, capital H. So they just told me where. Where am I going looking? Deep down inside. And how am I going to look? Sometimes I'm going to have to search fearlessly. So now it's starting to make sense that in the next step, I'm going to ask for power to go inward and do a searching and fearless moral inventory of me to find out what calamities, pomps, and worships are obscuring me from this power to live within me. Does that make sense? Okay? So it says, we found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it's only there that he may be found. It was so with us. So who's the us? The first 100 and their witness of the first several thousand. How many of you have gotten well, you've had your encounter, and then the world kind of got in the way and you lost consciousness of your spirit and gotten into some difficulty again? So this is why we've got this whole manner of living and serving. Does it make sense? Because in the last analysis, it's only there that it may be found. If I get out in the world again, I can lose consciousness. Yes? Okay. All right, so we can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself. Then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. When they say consciousness of your belief, they're not talking I think, it's I know. I'm aware that I'm aware. Does that make sense? Because they told me I'm going to have the absolute certainty that my Creator lives in me and through me. Does that make sense? It's kind of cool shit, ain't it? So for those of you that have heard the silly things over the years, that it can be a group of drunks, or it can be a light bulb, or it can be a doorknob, that's nonsense. It's not true. Unless you swallow that motherfucker, it ain't down inside of you. And there's no sense in lying to people and letting them die in their addiction because I don't have the courage to tell you what's been done for me. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm back to page 45. Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. What is my problem? Selfishness, self-centeredness, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-seeking, self-delusion, and self-pity. I step on the toes of my fellows. They haven't got me there yet, but they're going to get me there. And it's going to solve that fear problem. Why? Because I'm going to come into identity. Faith. Okay. That means we've written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral, and it means, of course, that we're going to talk about God. That's right. We got to do that again. It means, of course, that we're going to talk about power. Come on, the online people can't tell you. They don't even think you're enthusiastic around here. We're going to talk about power here. Not as a concept. How many of you have stuck your finger in a light socket? Was that conceptual power, or did it shock the shit out of you? Maybe they're going to talk to us about that. Okay. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. This is our fellowship. Make sense? A lot of people over the years have started saying, "Are you in the program?" Well, I'm in the program. And they mean I go to a meeting every week or every night. But sitting in a pond don't make you a duck. Sitting you in a room doesn't make you a recovered alcoholic. There's a whole manner of living. The program's in the book. Fellowship's in the rooms. Does that make sense? Okay. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we've reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. We know how he feels. No one is dissing your belief. You come to those beliefs from worldly experiences. All we're saying is if your life has got you trashed enough to end up in a place like this, listen to the testimony of the first 100, and some of us will help you understand that my understanding isn't the only understanding that I can gain. Does that make sense? Okay. So it says, we know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. So if you're new, or if you're new to this teaching, that's all your obligation is to you. Whoever you encounter that's going to help you with this process, share your honest doubt and prejudice. We will clear it up. But you've got a condition too, honest doubt and prejudice. You're just being silly, then we're going to let you be silly because you can't lie to us without our permission. You want to get well, then the healer in us will know that. And understand, that healer healed me, and he's going to heal you through me. It's still not going to be me. It's going to be an absence of me. Okay. Yeah. How people get well that come from our condition is above my pay grade. I just know who does it. Okay. So to others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. Any of you get harmed by religion? Okay, first we want to apologize to you for that. And second, let's not let fear of that happening again keep you from becoming a better version of yourself. Let us wrap you up and see if we can help you. Okay, perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. How many of you didn't think that whatever teaching you were given was inclusive enough? That's fair. Anytime we try and put God in a box, we're thinking too small, right? Okay. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. Any of you been bothered with that thought? How many of you would have to admit that whatever your chemical addiction was, it was a power greater than you, and you deathly feared not having it? So I've already demonstrated weak and cowardly, and I seem to have survived that. So let's just own it. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So we looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. And if you look around you and go, look at those people. Look at the religious people, the way they act. Look at those recovery people. They're not nice to me. The operative part wasn't recovery, it was people. Sometimes people aren't nice. Maybe I'm the people that needs to be nice. Just thank you, Kenny. We looked askance at many individuals who claim to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? Have you ever pondered that? How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? It's kind of above our pay grade, isn't it? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow?
The supreme being.
Ah, the supreme being could. Yet in other moments we found ourselves thinking when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. They're calling your attention to experiences of the Spirit that you've already had, and if you'll go with me a minute, we're going to make sure all of you who care to have one, have you ever had that experience, seen something so inspiring in nature that it was almost an out-of-body experience? You almost could feel yourself. Sometimes it happens around the birth of a child. It may happen something in nature. Anybody with me? How about, anyone ever been in a dangerous situation? Look at who I'm talking to. Okay, at the point of danger, did you notice how time seemed to slow down? When that happened, you experienced your consciousness. That's one of the names we call this power. Does that make sense? Where is my people that were athletic? Any of you ever go out and make that impossible catch, the perfect throw, take the perfect shot? Did you have any doubt when you did it that you were going to do it? No, because you were prepared at the time and you knew you were going to do it, right? When that happened, you experienced your intuitive self. That's another one of the names of this power. Did everyone who wanted to have one of those experiences? Because I'm feeling you pretty mightily in here right now. That's happening in you because it's happening in me. And so what I want you to understand is that's the power we call God. It's tangible. It is relevant to your life. Yes? Okay. So then it says, yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. That's why I called it to your attention. Because if it went by you before, you now, if you cared to, you did have those thoughts and experiences. Yes? And it did happen in you, right? It wasn't me telling you what was happening to me. It was happening in you. And I said, I'm sharing it with you because there's one who has all power. Does that make sense? Okay. So let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. So you understand, I'm teaching it directly. That's why I like you to have a book. I'm teaching it directly out of the book. That power is God. We're not doing this as a cheerleading exercise. There are people who can't come to believe because they don't believe God can be proven to exist. So they're going to go to great lengths. Bill Wilson, the famous agnostic, atheist turned agnostic, turned believer and writer of this book, said that I rest my case, right? It's more logical to believe than not to believe based on my experience. And he lays out a whole book about it. Okay, so it says, much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Why not?
God's not a conception.
And none of us can fully define or comprehend, so they're just telling me shit. People have been trying to tell me shit all my life. I've sold a little myself. Yeah, be careful when people tell you what God or what God is not, because the God I serve can be or not be. Anyway, our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and effect a contact with Him. So why did they say that my conception was enough to effect a contact with Him? Why didn't He just come get me?
Because it's inside me.
Well, because He already came and got me too.
That's right.
And I just didn't know that's what happened. But now we just called our attention to how time seemed to slow down. We just called our attention to all the things that we've survived and all the things we've been sustained to and all of these things going on. And yet, there's still this power emanating in and through me, yes? So I'm going to have to acknowledge the power in my life and then start in the process to get with the program about bearing witness, yes? Okay. So as soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, the spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. So possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. What do you imagine those are? 3 through 12, that's indicated. Did you notice how you got new direction right away? Oh, that's what it means. I'm going to follow through on my commitment. How do I know for sure I'm going to follow through on my commitment? Because I'm made new because of this encounter. He's going to see to it I follow through on my commitment. Right? Okay. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. To us, the realm of the Spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It's open, we believe, to all men. When, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. Power. Now, I want to caution you, because over the years and in many fellowships, they'll still tell you that it's a God of your understanding, and that's a false teaching. They don't ever say a God of your understanding until they're in a vision for you and they know you've had the experience. They talk to you about a God as they understood him, and then they describe this magnificent experience that they underwent in coming to believe in the power that animated them. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so this applies too to other spiritual expressions which you'll find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. So don't let somebody saying something block you off from seeking this experience you know you desperately need. You know, if you can't take it from one messenger, perhaps you can from another. The old-timers gave us a dictionary and said, don't get knotted up about the word. Find a definition of the word that doesn't offend you. Don't change the word, change your mind. Does it make sense? And the other thing that we don't tell you very good is you'll have this encounter in 2, you'll make a decision in 3, and it'll be indicated by an inventory completed, not be procrastinated in 4, right? And all of a sudden, you'll start having these experiences in your 6th step or your 9th step, or when you're out telling another person, you'll start having more profound experiences because you always get more power than you need when you're offering it to another. So don't stop. Once you start following, follow. Does that make sense? Okay. So at the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth. See how they're talking about commencing? Okay? To affect our first conscious relation with God as we understood him. Notice how they qualified what their understanding was. Conscious relation. Aware that I'm aware that there's a power operating in me and through me that is not of me. How many of you have discovered that you still think like you, but are sometimes empowered to act better than you? Well, then you already are in conscious relation. Why would you not want to improve it? Because in this realm, we are at the cellular level, action-reaction. That can't happen unless we've tapped into power. Does it make sense? Okay. So that was growth. Afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth, but if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere, so we used our own conception, however limited it was. God meets you where you are. Don't stay where he meets you. Follow. Does it make sense? We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? So if you want a second step experience after you've had this encounter, go to your quiet place and ask yourself that. Look yourself in the eye, in the mirror. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe? One caution. If you're in a recovery fellowship and you don't believe there's a power greater than you, you're wasting your own time. Because the only reason you came here is heroin, methamphetamine, fentanyl, cocaine, alcohol was a power greater than you. It's the only reason we come. We do not aspire to get here. And that's where we start. If that's a power greater than me, now I'm going to quit looking in the world for synthetic power, and I'm going to go deep down inside and get that power to live, and I'm going to improve consciousness until I can do great things through him. Does that make sense? As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he's on his way. How could they be so emphatic? Because this is their experience. They saw it thousands of times, they said. The name of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Okay, so it's not theories anymore, you know what I mean? All right, so it's been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. What cornerstone? My willingness to believe. And willingness is divine power, folks. They're going to teach you that later. Okay? All right, that was great news to us. Some of you don't think that's great news. For we'd assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith, which seemed difficult to believe. Did you fall victim to that? I got to take the whole cow, and all I want is a freaking steak. No, you don't even have to eat a whole steak. But I'll guarantee you, you get a bite of this power, that power will take the second bite. And you'll have a cow eaten in no time. Look around you, those of you who are members and graduates. How do you think something like this happens? Better believe it. There ain't no human power does this stuff. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes. But I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. Any of you had those thoughts? So what I want to tell you, if you're having those thoughts or have had them, if you can hear it, you already have it. Now, the idea is to wake up to it. Does that make sense? It's already, you already possess it. So now all we got to do is wake you up. Okay? So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. So what's the simpler level? Wherever you are. Wherever you are, whatever you believe, you are here, you're encountering power, and if you will follow a few simple suggestions, you will come to believe. Yep, you will eat the cow. Okay. Besides the seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. You guys ever had that happen? Many of us have been so touchy that even a casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. Any of you had that issue? Okay. And so where did the bristling come from? But did you, the bristle, was it a thought or did you feel the bristle? Oh, deep down inside. Interesting. That's where they said the power was found. There's often warfare within us when it looks like we're about ready to be snatched out. Does it make sense? Thanks for doing that. I appreciate that. No, I do. I mean, this is supposed to be interactive. We're sharing the spirit in here. Right? All right, so this sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we tried to be on other questions. How many of you had that discovery? Things I wouldn't even hear before, when I got tore up enough, I don't got enough. Go ahead. Okay. All right, so in this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. That's the mistake a lot of us new to 12-step and don't remember is we're not the persuader. Alcohol, methamphetamine, cocaine, fentanyl, heroin, they're much more persuasive forces. I got to wait till you're reasonable to approach you. Does that make sense? Okay. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. How many of you would describe your active addiction as a tedious process? We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. The reader may still ask why he should believe in a power greater than himself. We still got some there? Okay, good. We think there are some good reasons. Let's have a look at them. The practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Is that you? Show me, don't tell me. Show me where you're basing this on. Okay. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they're firmly grounded in fact. So do you know how many theories we operate in and assume them to be fact because of our experience of them? It's probably a lot more than we even want to contemplate, right? We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Why do I believe in electrical theory?
I got the shit shocked out.
And we've also found uses for it. We know, even though we can't see it, right? We have had the ability, maybe we see it streaking across the sky, but we're not thinking, right? But it's running through the walls, it's powering everything here, right? We see, feel, direct, and use. And so I'm assuming it's a reality, but it's just a theory. Okay? So everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there's good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate the visual proof is the weakest proof, particularly in our age, right? Because they can get a picture of anything. Okay. So it's being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. To illustrate, the prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful guiding creative intelligence, right there our perverse streak comes to the surface and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. So all they're saying is unimaginative things we walk through every day. We see matter, you see a podium. They're saying what we know scientifically is just a whirling mass of electrons whirling around at incredible speed. You, in fact, are the same whirling mass of electrons, but we think we're different. But we're all caught up in this field of whirling mass of electrons, seemingly with self-identity. So we know what is real, and then we know what we see, and now we want to get to what do we believe. I take it as I believe it, but it's just kind of not real. Does that make sense? So it says we read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Now help me with that. What do we say when we say God? Does it make any sense to say this universe of ours needs no power to explain it? Makes absolutely no sense. That's why it's so important we point people to power, not God, because that God is the signpost pointing to power, and that's why we lose people. And power is tangible. That's why I know I can form relationship. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. How many of you have lived a life that looked like that's what you believe? Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and end of all. Then they say, rather vain of us, wasn't it? So I want to go back, because when they put a question mark, they want us to go inward. They want us to get some insight. Eyesight without insight, spiritual blindness. So I need to go see why they thought it was vain and see if I can get with them. They said the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and end. Let's start with Alpha. How many of you were consulted on your entry into this realm? So whatever your theological argument of when life starts, probably no one consulted you before you arrived and came into awareness. True? So there went Alpha. In other words, if you're not following me, did your parents ask your permission to put you here? And was that their intent when they got together? That's a whole nother question, right? Okay, so we're going to leave alpha at the beginning because we don't know anything about alpha. We're not experts on alpha. How many of you did things throughout your life and career that a lot of people died doing? How many of you contemplated why, not me, why them, and why am I still here? How many of you tried to end it for yourself? Some of us did. How many of you didn't make it? Judging by us still here. So we're not all that good at Omega either. We know nothing about the beginning and we know nothing about the end. How many of you, like me, lost a decade or two in the... Yeah. Okay, so we know nothing about the Alpha, nothing about the Omega, and there's big parts of the middle I don't know. So for me to think I'm the Alpha and the Omega, that's rather vain of me, isn't it? Okay. So now, why do I want you to have the experience they had? Because rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. And we got to understand there's a path that's a process, but the path is also the power. So I need you to tack into the power because the power is the path is the power. When we talk about rarely followed our path, I need you tapped into power. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So we who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice even against organized religion. We've learned that whatever the human frailties of the various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea what life is all about. Why do people of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about? Yep. The reality is, if I'm a person of faith, then I know I don't need to worry about much anything. Because pretty much everything's above my pay grade. Does it make sense? So it says, actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. Have any of you ever noticed that? Any of you bounce in and out of recovery or maybe go to and fro with your church and you always found the stable ones that were always there with their hand out and, welcome back, and can I help you? Yeah, okay. Instead, we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. You ever just had a bad experience and thrown the whole thing away? Most of us have, right? Okay. So we talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. That's the problem. See, the world has no power to cause how I think or feel. So when I start judging the world based on my limited perspective, all I'm seeing is the way I'm thinking. I'm not seeing reality at all. And so I'm always going to be oppressed some percentage of the time. Does it make sense? Okay. So we miss the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. I'm going to jump from there to the next paragraph past the personal stories. And I want to read this to you and then think about it in your own recovery walk and recovery fellowships and why we do this the way we do, because we think that a lot of the reason we went from 65% efficacy from 1939 to 55 to present day, in spite of the advances in medical science, the reason we did it is we took the power out. And we weren't talking about a theology. I'm talking about the power that's been animating some of you sitting in here tonight, because I've been feeling you. Make sense? Okay. So it says, on one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself, capital P. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. Here are thousands of men and women worldly indeed. This is the book. The first 100 wrote the testimony that they saw the restoration to wellness of several thousand men and women regarded hopeless by medical science. In fact, the first 100 were regarded hopeless by medical science. But they lived to tell the story of several thousands, and now we're among millions. Okay? All right. They flatly declare that since they came to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power and to do certain simple things, there's been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. How many of you, the last time you got an opportunity to share, went up to the podium and flatly declared that I have come to believe in a power greater than myself, and that power has accomplished through me things thought impossible, the miraculous, and he sent me to tell you because he wants to do it for you too. Wouldn't that be better than a horror story? That's what they did back then. That's what they did. They recorded it in this book. It says, in the face of the collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. Why wouldn't I want to tell people about that? Power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flowing in. How many of you can bring to consciousness hitting that pipe? Power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flowing in. Got to get more. We're changing synthetic experiences for truth. Does that make sense? This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. What are the requirements? Trust God, clean house, work with others. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they showed the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. You should have faith in your own recovery because the consciousness, the awareness of being aware of the presence of God in and on my life is what brought me to you. And that you're feeling as you're hearing that truth, whether you can comprehend it doesn't matter. The fact that you're feeling me, that means that power's got you. And if you're in this building, that power had you 9 months ago. Or 2 years ago, or whatever. And we are unapologetic about it around here. Okay. I want to go from there to, let's read about fits. I'm going to go to page 56 of the book. They're going to talk about one of the early AAs. They called him Fitz. And you can see if any of you relate to Fitz. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. Any of you get raised in a home where that happened to you? Okay. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. So they're giving us an idea of what the calamities are that I'm going to discover. They're not Fitz's calamities, they're mine. But if I can relate to him, those are the calamities that went on that changed my worldview. Does it make sense? Okay. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. Any of you ever been brought to the point of self-destruction? Probably everyone in here, right? So we definitely got that in common with old Fitz. All right. So one night when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. That's an interesting qualification, isn't it? Because you cannot transmit what you do not have. So this alcoholic who came to visit him had known a spiritual experience. He didn't have a meeting list. He had the God Almighty. Okay? Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." That was his response to the AA who was there to serve. Any of you AAs go to serve and get yelled at? You're not doing enough of it if you ain't been yelled at. Okay. We ain't here to preach to the amen chorus. For us, it's all Nineveh, you biblical scholar. They all sinners, Sean. And they don't want to hear what we got to say. All right. But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question. Don't be afraid to plant the seed. Tell them the truth. Deliver the message like the mailman. Don't stay around to see if they like the mail. Plant the seed. Later in his room, he asked himself this question. He went inward. Is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Any of you ever been there? Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came and it crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? Some of you felt that. Think about that coming into your thought life in your room alone. How many of you have had such a thought, such a conviction? What did you do? Let's see what Fitz did. This man recounts that he tumbled out of his bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by the conviction and the presence of God. Any of you ever read about Saul's trip to Damascus? You think old Fitz had an experience like old Saul? He was overwhelmed by the conviction of the presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built through years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. That's Fitz's story. We're going to stop there, but I want you to know wherever you come from, however you've been harmed, we're talking about tangible power. Most of you in here, I'm convinced, had an experience of some kind tonight. So that same power is what we're going to enjoy to enact our decision.